when I look at growth, if I can continue to foster that both at home and, on the job, then I'm doing
Mm-hmm.
something right. I became an entrepreneur at the same time that I became a parent. And I feel
Oh,
like the two really have become sort of one for me. I feel like I reached
okay.
a certain part of my life where I felt like it's time to start giving back a little bit. And
Mm-hmm.
then when we started Versus, I really started to feel like a very strong sense of responsibility to everyone else. I wanted to make sure we built a culture here that people felt like they were valued, that they were heard, that they
Mm-hmm.
had the opportunity not just to weigh in, but to shape things both creatively or behind the scenes. I always wanted people to feel like they had a sense of purpose within
Mm-hmm.
what we were building here. And I kind of feel like I parent in a very similar way. I want my kids to know that they have a say in how we do things together.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, I want to make sure that my children, growing up in this day and age, still take independence very, very seriously. I want them
Yeah.
to get off their phones as much as
Mm-hmm.
possible and get out in the real world. I want people to feel an experience around them with everything they do.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back. I am your host, Nikki Corbett, and today I have Rob Meyers joining me from New York to share with me about his company, Versus. They are in the creative production space, and I'm excited to hear all that he has to share. Rob, welcome.
Nikki, thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad to be here with you.
You are welcome. So let's just jump right into it because I'm really excited to learn more about Versus. Tell me how you got started.
Absolutely. So Versus is about 11 years old at this point. We've been growing year over year, both in size and in capabilities. The company was once this very, very small studio that was based in New York City, and now we have global reach. We have offices in New
Awesome.
York and in Los Angeles, and teams that are in Europe and South America. So the company's really grown so much over the past 10 years. And it's grown not just in size, but also in capabilities. We started out as a design and visual effects company and have taken on more post-production capabilities like editorial and finishing. We also do live action. So, in total, the company has really been like a rocket ship over the past 10
Awesome.
years. Yeah.
Well, that's a great way to describe a company. So, as you're saying all these different things that you guys offer and what you do, I'm envisioning, who your clients are is maybe like commercials, productions,
Yeah.
advertisements, broadcasts.
Yeah, we work with so many different clients and so many different verticals. We work direct to brand. We work with advertising agencies. We work with networks and streamers. And Versus also has an originals team, which creates programming that's long form, either
Oh,
for
cool.
series or even short content. So we really do have a lot of different arms at Versus that enable us to service a lot of different clients.
Okay. So, how did you get into this business? Is this something you've been involved in your whole career?
I kind of started someplace totally different, but I found this world and I've never left it once I got there. I
Okay.
started out I always had a fascination with writing. So I started out
Hmm.
actually as a journalism student and really thought that that was
Okay.
where I would find myself. But along the way, I started doing copywriting and really
Hmm.
found a lot of love for that. I loved storytelling in general.
Hmm.
So I've sort of built on that skill set throughout my whole career, kind of rising up the ranks from a writer producer to producing longer forms of work and then running teams of my own before we started Versus.
Okay. So what was the moment? What was the tipping point that caused you to go into business for yourself?
I really feel fortunate that I had some incredible mentors along the
Hmm.
way, and I got to see what entrepreneurship really was from a
Yeah.
lot of different people. Prior to Versus, I really never worked for what you would consider like a large or corporate feeling company. I worked in a lot of
Okay.
intimate settings. And I worked hand in hand with a lot of founders, and I really appreciated the education that they gave me along the way. I got to a point where I really felt like I was ready on my own to do it my way. That's
Mm-hmm.
not like to say that I didn't appreciate or didn't like the way other people
Oh, of
ran their
course not.
businesses, but I definitely got to a point where I knew that I had something of myself to bring to this, and so I think
Mm-hmm.
versus and my partnership with my with our creative director, my business partner, Justin Barnes, I think that's what arose from that.
Okay. I think that's cool. And I like that you said that you wanted to do things your own way because I think that that's kind of, you know, the point of entrepreneurship, right? Is that you see something a little bit differently than the way other people see it and you decide to go out and create something on your own. And I think it's very timely with everything that is going on in the world today where we see a huge shift from brand marketing to personal marketing and brands really empowering employees. I mean, some, I guess I've seen both sides of things, but there's a big push by people who are very strong personal brand ambassadors and people who really believe in the power of personal branding to talk to corporate employees and say like, hey, like you want your employees to be like brand ambassadors for you. You don't like we're not buying things from brands anymore. We're buying things from people.
Yeah. No, it's funny that this is maybe a little off topic, but, the idea of a personal brand is obviously not something that I think we thought about too much like 20,
Mhm.
25 years ago. But,
Yeah.
when I was coming up, I was fortunate enough to work with a creative director who was brilliant in the brand space,
Mhm.
and we did a lot of work that shaped the foundations of branding for big companies like Nickelodeon, for instance.
Oh, cool.
We were a part of their rebrand when they changed their logo and their marks and all of their branding across everything. And when you're looking at something like that from a mark, how it looks on a television, to how it looks on a cruise ship, to how it looks on a piece of paper, like you
Mhm.
really start to learn the value of a brand. And I think what was really
Mhm.
cool about getting that sort of on the job education is I think it kind of prepared me for the social media world that was to come from there. It kind of
Mm.
let me understand that I needed to sort of have my own sense of identity, my own sense of
Mhm.
personal brand. I've
Mhm.
never been like a massive social presence, but I know that when people hear from me, they know exactly what is on brand for me.
Oh,
And
uh-huh. Uh-huh.
I think that's
Yeah.
something that I kind of cultivated, learning from how it gets done for large companies, so that I could apply it
Mhm.
to myself.
Yeah. No, I love that. I giggled a little bit when you said on brand because I love that term, especially when, something happens that was like you weren't expecting, but also you're like, oh my God, that's so me. Of course that happened, and that's
Yep.
really just like, oh, this is so on brand for me. Like, of course this happened. Um, yeah. I mean, I laugh all the time when different things happen. I just recently got back from some travel and I paid very close attention. I'm really big on self-awareness and especially my own self-awareness. So I pay very close attention to like the things where I get frustrated and when and how I react and how I respond. And on this most recent trip, the I struggle very much with logistics. I've come to learn, especially flying, I'm fine. But like when I'm taking forms of transportation that are not common for me here, i.e.,
Mhm.
buses and trains, I mean, it's like it turns into meltdown city. And I'm just like, I don't know what I don't know. I'm trying so hard. Maybe next trip I'll be better, but yeah, so very on brand for me to get
All right, Brent.
lost, take the wrong train, take the wrong bus.
Oh yeah, I think we all have our brand attributes, right?
Yeah, definitely. So when you guys first decided to launch Versus and forge your own way in the business, what were you focused on and who were your first types of clients?
Um, you know, I when we first started out, we had a very design driven sensibility, which we applied from everything to motion graphics and visual effects to more static and out of home based opportunities. We definitely focused more in the post production world than we did in front of the camera.
Mm-hmm.
And then, things sort of steamrolled from there. We got some amazing opportunities that could then bring in other capabilities. And from there, we just, again, kept adding on and building out this, versus mindset and applied
Mm-hmm.
it to different ways of creativity. From a design standpoint, it was always very important for us to share the companies that we work for's message in a clean, clear, and sophisticated way. And
Mm-hmm.
so we've always tried to capture that simplicity, but with an elevated sense with everything
Okay.
we've done, whether it's more heavily animated or whether it's much more straight to camera.
Okay. Okay. So here's a question for you that's kind of alongside of what we were just talking about. You said that when people hear from you, they know kind of like what's on brand for you. So now, as far as the work you do, is could you say the same for that? If I were to see something you guys have done, would I know, oh, this came from Versus? Or are your customers so across the board that it's not necessarily about the visual output as it is about how you get to that visual output?
Such a great question, and I almost feel like I could answer it from completely, like, diametrically opposed ways. Because on the one hand, I would say if you asked me like what is the look and feel of a versus project,
Hmm.
we set out when we started to not have a look. There's some
Okay.
incredibly talented, incredibly amazing teams in our space, competitors that who made that when you look at the work. It's very, very
Okay.
apparent, and there's nothing at all wrong with that. You can build an incredibly successful business doing that, but for us that felt like it was limiting. It limited our creativity if we were kind of just doing the same thing in a different form all the time. So we
Hmm.
always strived to apply our thought process differently, and not really force a look into something. There's a saying about you know to a hammer everything looks like a nail. Like, that's
Oh,
not
uh-huh.
that's not
Uh-huh.
how we look at things. And so we've always strived to bring a lot of different thoughts to our
Hmm.
creative, and in a weird way, mixing mediums, different forms of animation together in one place with live action is
Hmm.
actually something that we excel at, because it's bringing so many different things to the mix. And in a
Okay.
weird way, it may have inadvertently become the look that people know us for,
Oh,
which is
uh-huh.
a lot
Okay.
of different looks together.
Sure, sure.
So it's funny, in our effort to not create a look, we may have created a sensibility.
Got it. Okay. That's cool. I like that. So who are your clients? Like, do you have a specific type of client or a specific like base of people that come to you, or are you working across all industry?
We are definitely working across all industries. We, like I said, we've worked direct to brand, we've worked with
Hmm.
advertising agencies, and we've worked with networks and streamers. So whether it's marketing in the television space or in the commercial space, we do a little bit of it all. And we're fortunate to have built out some incredible long-term relationships. We do a lot of work with Audible as part of the
Oh, cool.
Amazon
Hmm.
system. We do a lot of work with Xfinity and Comcast. So
Okay.
we've been fortunate enough to cement some incredible relationships,
Hmm.
where we get into a brand or an agency, work together, gain their trust, and continue to build and build and build and get into a
Hmm.
lot of different spaces together.
Oh, cool. I actually just got an email today from Amazon saying that now Audible is a part of Amazon Music. And I think you can listen to like one book a month or something with your membership. And I was like, ooh, that's fun.
I, I would take advantage of it. It's an incredible library.
Yeah, I'm going to because, I feel like I'm one of those people where I go back and forth where sometimes I'm reading so voraciously that I like, you can't get the Kindle out of my hand. And then other times I'm like, I literally haven't picked up a book in like a month. And I'm like, I don't know why. There's no rhyme or reason to it. It's just seasonality, I guess. But I haven't really ever got into audibles, which is weird because I listen to a ton of podcasts. I have a podcast. So I feel like it's probably a logical next step for me.
Yeah. I mean, as somebody as what feels like as somebody that's like eternally on the subway,
Uh-huh. Oh, yeah.
I'm all about it.
Yeah. Yeah, because then you can like keep your eyes about your personal space while still listening to something, right? Versus being like shoved in your phone.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so tell me more about the originals that you guys are doing. So are these like original projects of your own?
Yeah. So a couple years back, we decided, as we've been known to do here, was we wanted to try something new, something exciting, and definitely something that scared us. I think that's something
Uh-huh.
that's like a core attribute of verses is we like to challenge ourselves. And
Good.
this was a new area that we felt like we could apply what we've learned, but also do it in a way that was unique to us. And so we
Mhm.
started our originals division,
Mhm.
which really is about IP creation. It's not so
Okay.
stuck in a specific format or medium. So
Okay.
we've developed limited series, we've developed feature docs, we've developed novels and graphic novels, and we've developed
Okay.
games. So it's really about finding the right way to tell a story more than anything
Mhm.
else, and not
Okay.
being limited by your traditional advertising timeframes of 30
Mhm.
seconds or, 2 to 3 minutes of content. This is something where we can really like tell a real story.
Okay. So what would be like how long? How long is an original?
So we've done a lot of different things. One of the first things we had was a documentary that we sold to AMC in the
Cool.
hip hop space, and we've actually done a few docs in that space for different networks.
Mhm.
Most recently for Paramount Plus, we did a doc about one of the founders of Black Sheep, called "The
Okay.
Choice Is Yours." And so we've done a lot in the doc space,
Mhm.
specifically musically, and in the sports
Okay.
world, we did a doc that was based on the Tour de France.
Oh,
And
okay.
then we've also done limited series. Limited series, we did a true crime series for Hulu called "Where's
Okay.
Private Delaney," which was a huge success for them. And gave us an opportunity to do like an episodic feel. There was three
Mhm.
episodes for this. So yeah, I mean, I think we're playing around with a lot of different ways to tell stories. Um, we're sort of starting
Mhm.
our dabbling with scripted at this point. We're looking into an animated series
Mhm.
right now. So again, I think we like to vary things up and challenge ourselves. So there's no one
Uh-huh.
way that I think we look to break a story. I think we just try to find unique tales that we think people would want to listen, watch, and then we try to identify who's the right storyteller and what's the right medium to tell that.
Okay. So now forgive my ignorance here when I ask this next question, but I just want to make sure I'm understanding you correctly. So when you say that if you're creating a documentary, for example, and you said, oh, we did it for Paramount or we did it for Hulu, does that mean that they came to you and said, hey, we want to do a documentary on this person? And then you guys said, okay, and you just went for it and created the whole thing? Or did you start off saying, like, we want to do a documentary on this person and then pitched it to them?
So it can obviously it can go both ways.
Uh
It can
huh.
originate from either direction. In our cases, these were original ideas that we had done research on, that we had formulated into what we thought was a captivating tale, and then we
Hmm.
went to the networks with a treatment, with a presentation, with some raw footage, and said, "This is the story we want to tell. We'd love for you to come on board,
Hmm.
tell the story together." And it's been great. I mean, we've done it both ways. We've completely created something, and then gone out and sold like a completely finished piece that was aired. We've
Hmm.
also, sold something on very little other than, a few pages of a treatment and then
Hmm.
put it together in collaboration. So there's, again, not one way to approach these things. And we've had a little success in each different area.
Okay. So when you're putting together a documentary, documentaries intrigue me so much because they're like things that really happened, right? I mean, I certainly love a good movie and series with the best of them, but sometimes when you see a documentary and you're like, whoa, and when it's like, footage of the town or the street or the house or all of those things that went into parts of telling this story, that's what I think is so neat. So when you come up with those, is it then people on your team, or are you guys hiring folks to be like, okay, hey, we need to go and get footage from this small town USA, and these are the places that we need to have good stuff, and then you have like the person who's narrating it?
So we have an amazing team in house here that has, specifically in this area, broken some pretty amazing stories, and they're very varied.
Okay.
Like I said, it's everything from true crime to, um, you know, behind the scenes to, historical. We've kind of
Hmm.
touched it all. Um, there's always, directors that we want to work with that we'll bring
Hmm.
in that are not necessarily part of the team, but they do inevitably become part of the family.
Uh-huh.
Um, but from a production capabilities set,
Hmm.
almost all of the work is done in house.
Okay, cool. That's awesome. So, when you guys are working with brands, that's something that I'm also interested in learning more about because, I've seen different brands more recently, they'll do a campaign, and instead of traditional models, if you will, or actresses in their campaign, they're bringing on influencers, which I
Mhm.
think kind of goes back to the whole like personal branding, right? Using influencers to sell, people are buying from people. So when in your experience with brands, are you seeing those types of things as well, and or what is happening when they bring you guys on board?
It's so interesting to me, and if I say this and I make myself sound old, I don't think that I'm old, but it's happened. It's changed so quickly. Um,
Yeah.
Talent, in so many cases, it felt like years ago, talent kind of came towards the end, right? Like you
Okay.
had an idea and you built out a plan, you built out the
Uh-huh.
creative, and then you fit the talent into the role that you created. But I
Uh-huh.
feel like talent is a conversation that happens so much sooner now. And I think whether it's, an influencer or a celebrity, or even just knowing that you are hitting the right demographic, like it's such an
Mhm.
important part to shaping the conversation right now. With
Yeah.
influencers in particular, it's funny, it was the first job for me at Versus was
Uh-huh.
influencer based. And it
Oh,
was
okay.
literally the first time in my career that you know, I had to find the influencer. I had to make sure the influencer had the right audience and the right amount of
Uh-huh.
followers, and I had to go through all these things. And it was very eye opening to me because
Mhm.
um, it was so counter to this very very traditional ad space that I was used to. Um,
Mhm.
and it set the tone for a lot of what was to come. I mean, I want to
Yeah.
say like the first couple of years, it was like all we were doing was casting for the right influencer, finding quote
Mhm.
unquote real people for spots.
Yeah.
So it's definitely something that I think, over the last 10 years has been like, a shift in the dynamic of
Mhm.
how things get made.
Yeah, I think it's so neat because even there, I feel like I've seen more lately. Like I feel like the people I follow from an age perspective, talk about like making yourself feel old, right? There's people that I follow who are my age, but I would say a lot of the influencers that I follow are actually probably half my age. And I think that there's like a number of reasons why I follow them. One, because I do like the things that they're putting out, but two, because I'm also just so intrigued by that whole younger generation and what they're doing and how they're doing it and how they, even started and where they are now. But then when I see them, in like ad campaigns for brands that were really popular when I was in my mid 20s, like Juicy Couture, for example, right? Like I was, all about those velvet sweatsuits that had the, matching color. I remember I had this teal one and my dad hated it with a passion for some reason. He thought it was so unattractive, but I loved it, right? But now I see Juicy more and more is like making a comeback, and like they're targeting that mid 20s demographic, and they're putting influencers in their campaigns and sponsoring different bridal parties and doing different things. And I'm like, that's so neat to see. And I think it makes it more relatable, because it's like, if I'm seeing my favorite influencer wearing something, I'm probably might be more, higher odds that I would buy something there, versus just seeing some random model that I have no idea who she is. She's just a model.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think you're alone there. And a thing that, is interesting to me is the amplification that influencers have is
Mm-hmm.
kind of mind-boggling. Like,
Yeah.
we've done some things where we've had somebody, post on our behalf or whatever as part of the brand deal. And I mean, the amplification that you see between what a brand can do without the talent and what it can do with the talent. Like a great
Mm-hmm.
example of this is we do a lot of work with Octagon as the agency for their Home Depot brand. And
Oh, okay.
when Home Depot posts something, there
Mm-hmm.
is, obviously a brand's worth of followers there.
Yeah.
But when one of the on-air talent from College Game Day, which is sponsored by Home Depot, posts the exact same video, it's
Mm-hmm.
double, like, or
Oh,
triple
uh-huh.
or whatever.
Yeah.
So like
Yeah.
it's the same video, right? But the engagement that talent has with their audience is so much more intimate than
Mm-hmm.
really what a brand like a home improvement company can do on its own.
Okay. Yeah, that totally makes sense. That totally makes sense. So, you mentioned a business partner and how you guys got started. So, you also mentioned some tremendous growth over the last 11 years, and now, having studios in multiple locations and multiple parts of the world. What does your team look like today?
Our team has definitely grown a lot, way more than I thought. I mean,
Mhm.
I'll be honest with you, I was one of these guys that I think, maybe very naively when we started said like, I think the perfect size team is, 15 or less. Was like that was kind of like my sensibility.
Mhm.
Because I always thought like a small team could accomplish so much. And then you
Yeah.
realize like how quickly, like, as you grow, how it's all exponential, right? Like,
Uh-huh.
you know, to double in size of revenue doesn't mean you double in size of the team. You might need
Yeah.
6 times or 8 times the amount of team as you're
Uh-huh.
scaling. So it's like it's been an interesting journey for us. The team right now is probably a little over 30 on staff with a lot of permalance artists that we work with around the world. So it still
Mhm.
feels intimate. I still feel like I have a very, very tight connection to everyone on the team. I still make
Uh-huh.
sure that I spend, a good one-on-one time with everybody on staff every month. So it
Mhm.
hasn't gotten to a place where I don't feel like I'm connected to all of the inner workings.
That's
But it is
great.
definitely way bigger than I think I had originally imagined.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you had imagined it to be half of what
Yeah.
you actually are plus some,
Yeah.
that's definitely a lot bigger. That's definitely a lot bigger. So, what are the plans for the future? How are you guys going to continue to grow and scale now that you have your main business and then your originals that's taking off?
Yeah. I mean, I think, we growth for us is probably defined by how we look at the three pillars of versus ultimately, right?
Hmm.
When it comes to creativity, growth for us is constant innovation. It's
Hmm.
important for us to move with the times and get ahead of that even. And so, you know, whether it's working in AI, which my partner Justin just gave an amazing keynote at the Adobe Max conference about the
Oh,
use of
cool.
AI in creative, or creating new tools that allow us to do real-time animation. These are all ways that we see our creativity growing in the future. From a sales
Mhm.
perspective, it's kind of like what I said to you earlier about Audible. I mean, every relationship that we foster, we look as a way into growth. I think we
Mhm.
want to land these clients, and then we want to expand these relationships in a way that
Mhm.
allows us to help them in a lot more areas. When we first started with Audible, it was very purely working with their brand campaigns, but we made
Mhm.
a good impression, and the next thing you knew, we were working in the social space and other digital
Mm.
spaces. We started doing out of home. So for me, that's success
Yeah.
as I see it from like a relationship standpoint.
Mhm.
And then when it comes to the production arm of Versus, I think it's important that this is a stable and foundational part of our company.
Mhm.
The production team here is really at the heart of everything because we have incredibly creative producers who came from other fields, whether it was edit or design. We have producers that are so articulate and so great with relationships that they lead their own sales initiatives. So, to
Mhm.
me, investing in our producers and giving them the opportunity to continue to train, educate themselves, and better themselves is how we
Mhm.
protect ourselves for the future.
That's great. So it's funny that you said AI when you were talking about creativity, because that was going to be one of my next questions was, how does AI fit into everything that you guys do as we, as AI continues to get smarter and smarter by the day, right? So
Yeah,
what ways have you
we
guys integrated that into the business?
I think from our perspective, what we're trying to make sure we articulate about ourselves is responsible use of AI. I think it's
Mhm.
kind of a wild west right now, and there's a lot of
Yeah.
ways you can get yourself in a lot of trouble, both
Yeah.
from a look and feel where things are just
Mhm.
not quite ready for prime time, and also
Mhm.
from a legality standpoint, there's still a lot that's yet to be determined. So there are amazing tools that we are skilled in that we're able to utilize to do the kinds of things that make projects more efficient without replacing the human element of it. And I think that's what's important to us. There's a lot of things that AI can do to streamline
Mhm.
tedious parts of the process that we've always tried to find better tools for. When we use AI in that manner, I feel like it really is an enhancement to the creative.
Mhm.
We're definitely not in that space right now where we're looking to use AI as a replacement for
Yeah.
people,
Mhm.
for talent, for creativity. That element, that human element, needs to be brought to the creative for it to be
Yeah.
successful. In the absence of it, I think you've seen all of the examples of AI gone awry, which is
Yeah.
clearly what we're trying to avoid.
Sure, sure. Yeah, I know. I feel like AI is such an interesting topic because it is affecting, all types of businesses, and I mean, really every individual. I mean, just from even the way you can type it into chat, and
Mhm.
it can give you so much so quickly. It's mind-blowing. But it also, now I feel like we're at a point where so many people are able to recognize, like, oh, that was written with ChatGPT, like, oh, that was written with ChatGPT. So you're kind of like, okay, well, then what are we going to have to do to like use it for what it should be intended for, but then still have that personal touch on it so it doesn't sound like, oh, I know that you didn't write this yourself.
Totally. I mean, and I'm not against that, right? Like, let it be your first draft. Let it, for like any writer who has sat at a blank page long enough,
Hmm.
trying to start the
Yeah.
ball rolling, get the juices flowing. Like, if ChatGPT can give you something to like not to look at that's not a blank page, I'm all
Hmm.
for it. It's
Yeah.
just it to your point. It's one of those things where like an entire generation has to learn how to wield this tool responsibly. I
Hmm.
mean, I remember going to the library as a kid and basically copying from the encyclopedia word for word, right? And then
Yeah.
realizing,
Yeah.
okay, I can't do that. I have to change a few words so that the
Yes.
teacher doesn't
Yes.
catch up on this, right? So like
Oh
it's
my
not
gosh.
we've just found a more a more advanced way of doing the exact same thing we did
Mm-hmm.
manually 20 something years ago. So we're
Yes.
not
Yes.
reinventing anything here. We're just have to remind ourselves of the responsible way to work with these tools.
God, that's so funny that you said that because it reminds me of a story. One of my friends, he was talking to at the time she was like, I think maybe like a senior in high school or something. And she was at home and she was doing like a report for school. And she was doing all this research on the computer and looking things up. And he told me that he said to her, he was like, so, hey, do you know when I was your age and I had to do projects like this, like I would have to go to the library to like do all of my research? And her response was, why? Is that where the computers were? And he was like, no, we didn't have computers. I
We
had to
didn't have
look
that.
at books.
I I mean I'm going through it right now. I have two young teen children, and it's pretty wild to me. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
the even just the idea of, I mean, how things change so dramatically during
Mm-hmm.
the pandemic. um
Yeah.
there were these tools that were used just sort of, I think, kind of makeshift at the moment, like this is the best we can do, and
Mm-hmm.
they kind of just became the standard at this point. And so
Yeah.
like I'm still dealing with my kids like submitting their homework digitally, and
Oh.
there's like the like I guess the modern equivalent of the dog ate my homework is that
Oh.
that Google Classroom didn't accept the submission or something, right? Like it's there's always like a new
That's
way for
so
the same
funny.
old tricks.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Oh my God, that's hilarious. Like, no, I swear I submitted
No, I
it.
swear I
It
submitted it
must.
is like the number
Yeah.
one thing, right?
Oh my gosh. That is funny. Yeah, it is. It's the same problems just being solved differently, right?
Yep, exactly.
Oh my gosh. So I love everything that you've shared with me so far about Versus. So tell me a little bit more about yourself, and what do you see, like what is your vision for the next few years, and how you continue to evolve with the company and with your personal brand, and is there anything you can tie back to prior versions of you that are things you want to accomplish?
Yeah, I it's funny. I I was recently talking with somebody about sort of the stages of your life, and
Mhm.
I became an entrepreneur at the same time that I became a parent, and I feel
Oh,
like the two really have become sort of one for me. I feel like I reached
okay.
a certain part of my life where I realized that there and this is not to say that I'm not looking for personal growth, but this was a time in my life where I felt like it's time to start giving back a little bit. I was very fortunate
Okay.
to have incredibly strong role models, to have
Mhm.
incredibly talented and creative mentors,
Mhm.
um, to have the opportunity to build the foundation of what is really a career. And
Mhm.
then when we started Versus, I really started to feel like a very strong sense of responsibility to everyone else.
Uh-huh.
I wanted to make sure we built a culture here that people felt like they were valued, that they were heard, that they
Mhm.
had the opportunity not just to weigh in, but to shape things both creatively or behind the scenes. I always wanted people to feel like they had a sense of um, purpose within
Mhm.
what we were building here. And I kind of feel like I parent in a very similar way. I want my kids to know that they have a say in how we do things together.
Mhm.
Obviously not a total say on what they get to
Yeah.
do, but
Yeah.
I want to make sure that my children, growing up in this day and age,
Mhm.
still take independence very, very seriously. I want them
Yeah.
to get off their phones as much as
Mm-hmm.
possible and get out in the real world.
What do the kids say now?
And
Touch grass.
yeah, like I want people to feel an experience around them with everything they do, right? And that's
Mm-hmm.
in the workplace. I want them to have a sense of purpose and feel, that they are a part of something bigger than themselves. And it's the
Mm-hmm.
same thing I want my kids to feel too. I want them to feel like, that they are part of a community. I want them to get out and about. I want them to bring things back to me and say, I want to do this, or why,
Mm-hmm.
why do people do things this way? Like, I value the curiosity so much, um, that, to me, when I look at growth, if I can continue to foster that both at home and at the, on the job, then I'm
Mm-hmm.
doing something right.
That was probably one of the best answers to that question that I've ever heard. I absolutely love that whole like vision and philosophy, and I mean it certainly seems like you're living it, you're doing it. So that's so cool. Thank you for sharing that with me.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So when we had our first introduction call, you made a comment that stuck with me because you said something along the lines of you didn't necessarily feel like you were thinking like a business owner or like an entrepreneur until a little bit after starting the business. And what I and it's something like how you kind of started because you were really good at what you did, and then now that the business has grown you were like, whoa, now I'm like really thinking about things so much differently. And I thought that that was really cool because from a strategic perspective, from a ownership perspective, from a growth perspective, there are so many different lenses that you have to take a look at things through when you're building and growing and scaling a business. So now that you're wearing those lenses and looking at everything differently, what do you feel like the change has been since you acknowledged how you're viewing things?
I think that I definitely feel like growing this company has forced me to define, I guess, the difference between being in charge and being a leader.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like when we started, I was very much focused more on being in charge, and not in a
Uh-huh.
bad way, but
Mm-hmm.
you know, I have this role. I need to see this through to this stage. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to move all the pieces around, around the board to get what I want.
Mm-hmm.
Which is not leadership, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's like a
Yeah.
functional way to execute something, but it's not
Uh-huh.
leadership. And I think what I've
Uh-huh.
learned over time is that leadership can take a lot of different forms, but what it isn't is telling people exactly what to do.
Yes.
Um, and so to me, that's sort of what shaped the most about me in my
Mm-hmm.
role over probably, let's say the last 5, 6 years. Certainly, the pandemic presented the ultimate of challenges when it comes
Yeah, no
to
kidding.
leadership.
Yeah.
And so that was a bit of a boot camp of sorts there. Um,
Mhm.
but what I'll say is none of it's done in a vacuum, and I have,
Mhm.
incredible people around me. My my partner is one of the most inspiring people that I know,
Mhm.
who has taught me that it's okay to be a little afraid of what's going to happen next. Like, I was
Totally.
very, very, very risk averse, and this guy is somebody that
Uh-huh.
is not at all. So, like,
Yeah.
he's helped grow me. I've helped grow other people, on
Mhm.
the team, and I feel like together we've sort of formed this foundation of what Versus will be now and into the future.
That's so cool. And it's also it's the great like yin and yang of business partner, well, of any kind of partnership, right? Where you've got kind of you balance each other out in ways, and you've maybe, he's more like, let's just go for it. And you're like, but let's think about all of these different things. And then now maybe you think a little bit less, but you're maybe more willing to charge forward before you've ironed everything out. So
Absolutely, absolutely.
that's awesome. That's awesome. So, this has been so fun talking with you, Rob. I've loved learning about your business. And if where can people learn more about what you guys are doing? Where can people reach out to you if they want to work with you?
Please, obviously, our website is vsnyc.tv. You can find me on LinkedIn. Versus has a incredible presence on LinkedIn and on Instagram. So if you want to be inspired by the work or you want to get behind the scenes on how we accomplish something, please look for us on those channels.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here and sharing your story. And everybody who's listening and watching, thank you so much. As always, please subscribe to my channel, like, comment, share. I'd love to hear your feedback, and we will see you next week.